Tim, you've been a friend and a colleague for many years. It was only yesterday that I discovered that we both share a common challenge with penmanship.
I had never noticed Jack's signature, and when this was highlighted yesterday in the press, I considered rescinding my offer to appoint him. Jack assures me that he is going to work to make at least one letter legible in order not to debase our currency.
Obama having some fun with his new pick for Treasury Secretary Jack Lew. Let's talk about that and the serious issues he's going to deal with now on our roundtable, joined by Peggy Noonan from the Wall Street Journal, Judy Woodruff from PBS, married to Al Hunt from Bloomberg View, also David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, and Paul Krugman of the New York Times and Princeton. And I'm going to take a stab at trying to explain this $1 trillion platinum coin issue right at the beginning so that we can then debate it. It's rooted in a 1997 law. You see the law right there. They gave the president the ability to, the mint, ability to do commemorative platinum coins. What they didn't do is set a limit on how much the platinum coin could be worth. So the idea was you get a coin like this, is a mock-up right there, deposit it in the Federal Reserve, say it's worth $1 trillion. That would extend the debt limit for about a year, and the government would be able to go on. The White House earlier in the week did not close the door on this. It bubbled up through the blogosphere. And then, but Paul Krugman, you really got everybody's attention on Friday when you wrote in the New York Times, I'll get this right here, what we all hope, of course, is that the prospect of the coin or some equivalent strategy will simply take the debt ceiling off the table. But if not, mint the darn coin. Not 24 hours later, the Treasury Department said, absolutely no way. It's finally not going to happen. They closed the door.
Yeah.
But make the case for why you're for it.
Okay. The thing you have to understand is that the debt ceiling is a fundamentally stupid but dangerous thing. We have Congress that tells the president how much he must spend, tells him how much he's allowed to collect in taxes. He says, okay, there's a difference there. I've got to borrow it. And they say, no, you can't borrow them. So the whole debt ceiling thing itself is a crazy thing. It actually forces the president to do something illegal, either to defy Congress on what it told him to spend or to defy Congress and borrow when it told him not to. And then we have this weird loophole, which everyone agrees is crazy, but it happens to be there. But it is a loophole that says that the Secretary of the Treasury can mint a coin for, any amount, which was supposed to be for commemorative pieces, but it does offer a way to bypass this. And all it's really doing, it's just a way to bypass the debt ceiling. It's not even actually printing money. It's simply saying, hey, we're gonna say that we minted the coin. You don't actually have to mint the thing, right? You just say that you did, right?
Well, you wouldn't
well, you would have to, but it doesn't. Nobody ever has to see it. They all have to do is say we did it, and the Federal Reserve says, okay, you now have a $1 trillion bank account, which we will, when you withdraw funds from that, we will sell off some of our government bonds, which is just a way of borrowing through the back door, but it gets you past this craziness of the debt ceiling.
Apparently, now it's not going to happen. Apparently, Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, really did weigh in hard against this. David Walker, you've been against it for a while.
Well, the debt ceiling is a dumb idea. We're the only country on earth that has a debt ceiling. We need to reform that. We don't want to use it as a political tool. But, the $1 trillion coin's a dumb idea, too. Two dumb ideas don't make a good one. By the way, why would you spend the money on buying platinum? I've got a few $1 trillion bills here. Why would we want to waste money?
It's the only legal way to
do it. You're legally allowed to do the platinum. You're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to pass it. That's right.
That's right.
But now it gets you, Peggy Noonan, back to the drawing board, and this is what the White House was saying this week. Apparently, this platinum coin is not going to happen. Yeah. The Democrats in Senate want the president to examine all kinds of ways around facing this question head on, but it appears that the president has ruled all or most of them out.
Yeah, nobody actually knows what's going to happen. This is about this is the second debt ceiling crisis we've had in the past few years. We just got through the fiscal cliff thing. It is very strange to live in a great, sophisticated, wealthy, modern democracy and have this herky-jerky crisis cliffhanger thing that is going on and that has been for a while. Look, I am always hopeful for something like a grand bargain, but I think that won't happen now. I think we have more loggerheads, more brinksmanship ahead of us.
The White House position, which is right, is that there should be no bargaining over this. If the Republican majority in the House wants to cut spending, let them propose legislation that cuts spending and pass it, not hold America hostage. And what they say, I got calls, saying this rejecting the
from the
point
White House.
Yeah, was a sign of strength, not weakness. That we are not bargaining, we are not going to give in. We just want to make sure that the onus for this rests firmly on the Republicans, and they think they mean it. Whether they actually mean it, we'll find out.
We're going to find out about a month out. Hunt, and I struck in the Wall Street Journal this week. Karl Rove actually laid out a strategy for House Republicans, saying they should do exactly that: pass a bill which actually cuts spending by as much as they want to extend the debt limit for. What a lot of people point out is, if you're going to extend it for a year, $1 trillion, that's very hard to get 218 votes for.
Carl was about as good on that as he was in Ohio on election night. I think Peggy's advice was much better than Karl Rove's to Republicans. They can talk all they want to. Years ago, George, I had I was a young reporter. There was a veteran congressman named Jimmy Burke from Massachusetts who said, "Kid, my success here." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I vote for every tax cut. I vote for every appropriations, and I always vote against the debt ceiling." And I said, if everyone did that, there would be anarchy. He said, "What do you think? This place is on the level?" And that's what these guys are doing. It's not on the level. It's a total, complete fraud. And in the end, Republicans are not going to want to say, we're going to put the full faith and credit of the United States at risk so we can cut Medicare. That just won't happen.
And that's exactly what the White House is betting on.
But, George, that's exactly what Republicans are saying. I mean, they are saying, look, we went to the well. We let the president get what he wanted on the fiscal cliff. But when it comes to the debt ceiling, he's going to have to cough up some spending cuts. And they are saying they are prepared to go to the brink on this, even if it means, questioning the full faith and credit of the American government.
What happens then? Yeah.
Look, the Republicans need to wake up and get real. We're the only country on earth that has a debt ceiling limit. Ultimately, as part of a grand bargain, we ought to get rid of it. We ought to substitute statutory budget controls and a constitutional credit card limit, debt to GDP. But in the interim, if the Republicans want to use leverage, they ought to use it on the sequester and the continuing resolution.
Which is right on the heels of
Correct.
Yeah, we should not allow this become thought of as a legitimate or normal budget strategy. This is hostage taking. This is walking into a room saying, I've got a bomb, give me what I want or I'll blow up this room. This is not something, this has never happened before and should not be allowed to happen.
But doesn't that mean then that it's very likely to happen now for the first time, given the positions that each side has taken? And let me ask you, Paul Krugman, what are the economic consequences of that?
It's incredibly scary. This is much scarier than the fiscal cliff, much scarier than any of the other things out there, because we don't know what it does. What we do know is that U.S. government debt is the global safe asset. It is what every financial transaction relies on as the ultimate. This is what value consists of. Better than gold, better than anything. U.S. Treasury bills are the thing. And if they are no longer, if they're called into question, nobody knows what's happening.
This is something you actually agree on?
Well, yes, here's the issue. I used to be a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. Social Security is now negative cash flow. If you hit the debt ceiling limit, you can be at the point where at the beginning of the month, you can't send out Social Security checks on time. The last time we got Social Security reform was 1983. Why? Because we weren't going to send the checks out on time. Let's get real.
But that's why they are going to back down. That's why in the end they can't. It sounds great now.
You just think they're definitely going to do it?
Oh, I think they'll go right up to the brink, and then they'll get cold feet, and they'll go to the sequester, I think, which comes up right afterwards. I think the battle will be waged over that.
Peggy,
this is a losing proposition.
I think it should be noted that we have a president. I think it should be noted that he should be sitting down and talking with those who would attempt to move forward on spending. I consider it unusual that this president can never make a deal with those folks.
But this is not something you negotiate over. You do not negotiate with hostage takers. That's the White House position. They're right about that. You just don't negotiate on this. You can negotiate on the sequester, you can negotiate on taxes, but not on someone who is threatening to blow up the world economy if he doesn't get his way.
My goodness, that appeared to be the White House attitude on the fiscal cliff just a month or two ago.
It's very different.
Why can nothing ever be worked out? We do have a president, we do have legislative leaders, we do, it should be noted, have a spending crisis in America. It is not an eccentric thing to worry about the amount of spending that America does, the income, the outcome, and the long-term promises.
This is a doomsday. This is really saying, I will blow up the world unless you give me what I want.
The White House,
don't negotiate on that.
Again, the White House position is, look, Congress passed these bills. They're the ones that appropriated this money that we're talking now about cutting back. We're talking about cutting spending, and they're saying it's in their yard. They are the ones who need to bite the bullet.
Meanwhile, it also gets to the broader questions of the Republican strategy Judy, Peggy Noonan. I was struck by your Wall Street Journal column yesterday, which may be a little bit at odds with sitting down. I'm not sure. You say it's pirate time for the GOP. Wave a sword, grab a rope, and swing aboard the enemy's galleon. Take the president's issues, steal them. They never belong to him. They are yours. Elaborate.
Go for it. First of all, don't be the depressed, gray-suited gaggle that comes forward in the halls of the House once a day to speak in a sort of almost furtive and sad manner about what's going on. No great themes ever emerge. Nothing ever seems to get said. Look, this is a time to remember, in a way, the joy of politics. The Republicans are in a bad position right now. They just lost a big election. They are a bunch of folks in Washington. The president is one man with a mic. That man, the president, can always overpower them. My feeling is this is a wonderful time to be daring and surprising. Go to the populist right on economic issues, on things like breaking up the banks and the carried interest loophole. Go for immigration. Don't wait for the president. I know. I'm just here to amuse Paul.
Who funds the party these days?
I have a sense of who funds politics, and maybe that's not a good thing.
It's not just politics. It's what you do after you leave politics. It's the job waiting for these guys when they leave.
Why don't we face that? I mean, just when I say it's pirate time, I mean, remember, you're there for the people. Try to do good stuff. Do not giggle. It's no time to be cynical.
So who's walking the plank?
That's my question.
I thought it was a brilliant, provocative column. There's not a chance it'll happen because, to go to Paul's point, some Tea Party members ran in 2010. We are anti-Wall Street. We are against the banks. They got in there. They got on the Financial Services Committee, and guess what? They started getting money from J.P. Morgan, from Morgan Stanley, and not a single one of them voted against the banks. Immigration. Why did Mitt Romney turn into an immigration basher? He never was before because he went to Iowa in 2007. The base, the core. They're going to have a terrible problem with this because their base does not want immigration.
Well, except that Judy Woodruff, isn't hard-boiled politics going to push the Republicans in the direction of working with the president in some fashion on immigration? I noted that Marco Rubio is at least starting to talk about laying out a step-by-step immigration.
For sure on immigration. Marco Rubio, there are other Republicans who say look at what happened in election 2012. The president got 71% of the Latino vote. The handwriting is more than on the wall. A significant number of Republicans want to move, but George, there are also a lot of Republicans who are not ready to move. They can't abide the idea of a pathway to citizenship for those illegal immigrants who've been in the country.
Can I note, by the way, the Republican base, what you say fairly about the Republican base in 2007, 2008, 12 was true, but that base, not only the party establishment, but the base just experienced a big loss. There's a lot of thinking on the Republican side about the meaning of this and how to go forward.
I know you wanted to weigh in on these big financial issues. How is a pirate strategy consistent with a get real strategy, or not?
First, the biggest deficit this country has right now is a leadership deficit. And the truth is the wings of both parties don't represent America. We have a republic that is not representative of or responsive to the public. That's one of the reasons that I'm one of the national co-founders of No Labels, to promote progress over partisanship, results over rhetoric. We do need more leadership from the president. And the Republicans ought to get out there and have a plan and push forward with regard to a grand bargain strategy, because we desperately need one. We need one in 2013. We may not have until 2015. I'm confident we don't have to 2017.
Coming off the fiscal cliff negotiations and the whole experience of that, is that realistic at all in 2013?
I think it is realistic if you do three things. One, the president has to demonstrate much more leadership. He's the only one elected by all the people. He's the chief executive officer. He's got the bully pulpit. Secondly, we need to engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, and a way forward. I've done it all over the country, all 50 states. They're way ahead of the politicians. They can handle the truth. They're willing to accept tough choices. And thirdly, you need to have people work with the president on a constructive basis, recognizing that that the people want this done.
Let's talk about the president's team right now, because the president did appoint Jack Lew, Treasury Secretary, this week, leaving a big vacancy as chief of staff. And that, plus this photo that appeared in the New York Times earlier this week showing the president meeting with his economic advisors. It seemed like a lot of men, all men. Actually, Valerie Jarrett is right in front of the desk. You can see her ankle, I believe. But that, plus the appointment of Lew, raised a lot of questions about the president's team, whether there's sufficient diversity in his cabinet and in his White House, including from Congressman Charles Rangel.
It's embarrassing as hell. We've been through all this with Mitt Romney, and we were very hard on Mitt Romney with his women bind and a variety of things. And I kind of think there's no excuse when it's the second term.
And Judy Woodruff, the president and his team point out that 43% of his administration is still women, which is much more than George W. Bush, about where President Clinton was. But the appearance of having all white men in those big jobs and Eric Holder as Attorney General did rankle.
Well, and the fact that the president got double-digit support among women, second election in a row. He did very well with the women's vote. People look at this administration, and it's not just optics, which I think you said, and you were talking about something else. It's not just the optics. It's the reality of the administration. Their argument is, hey, we didn't do a great job of getting it done early. We've been distracted by things like the fiscal cliff. But when all is said and done, this is an administration that's going to look like America. Having said that, George, maybe they ought to take a line from Mitt Romney, binders full of women. They need to get moving. I mean, there are some jobs that are open, and we'll see who they pick. I think we're all watching.
What happened in the past few days with the woman's story in the White House is all fair. If that had been a Republican White House, I think we can all agree they would be clobbered for not having enough women. I think the message has probably been received by the Obama White House. I think at the end of the day, it's always good to have more women in the room. I suspect they will.
And Al, one of the other strains of criticism is that the president, and I guess you want people around you who agree with you for the most part, but that the president is choosing from a relatively small pool. Pretty interesting that the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense designee, and the secretary of state designee all serve together on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
He's turned upside down that team of rivals concept of 4 years ago. But I think the people he's picked are very capable. But let me take the economic team for a second in my worry. I think Jack Lew is an enormously capable person, as are other people. But you know something, George? These people are tired. They're exhausted. They have been through one battle after another. I mean, we talk about Hillary Clinton being spent, being exhausted. So are these people, and they're not bringing in any infusion of new people with new ideas. Not necessarily as replacement, but just to sit at that table and say, hey, how about this? It really is, and they're now talking about putting Dennis McDonough, whose sole experience is in foreign policy, as the White House Chief of Staff. There has never been a successful White House Chief of Staff who did not have Washington political experience.
Dennis McDonough served on President Obama's Senate staff, has been a Deputy National Security Advisor.
And solely in foreign policy. And he doesn't know political Washington. And if they do that, I think it raises questions about...
George, it's a little bit striking that at no point in this administration has there been any serious representation of what you might call the progressive economist wing, right? Which is a pretty big part of Obama's support.
Maybe Jared Bernstein
Jared
worked
Bernstein worked
Biden.
That's it. You now exhausted the list, and that's a little surprising, both given who brought him to the party, and also the fact that wing has been right about everything so far. Right? It's been right about interest rates, been right about monetary policy. So it is odd, and I don't have a problem with Jack Lew, who seems like he's a tough negotiator, which is what you need in the Secretary of the Treasury job.
Raise some questions of Republican senators.
When you bring this up with the White House, what they say is we do have vigorous debates on the inside. It may look monolithic from the outside, like we're all, but there are different views.
They talk to people from outside.
They do, and they say the president
is
talking to more people on the outside than he's giving.
But who's at the table is what matters,
there.
and I think Paul's point's right. They also promised to bring in a corporate CEO. They haven't done that. I mean, I think an eclectic group of people who can inject maybe some. We're having the same familiar.
My guess
face.
it's been hard to convince someone to take that job.
I think Al's right. You need to get some new blood in there. Sitting at the table makes a big difference. Jack Lew is clearly qualified for that job. Yes. I believe he's going to get confirmed, but he doesn't have good relations with Republicans. And if you want to get a grand bargain, if you want to make progress, there's differing degrees. If you want to make progress, you got to think about that.
One Democrat who may is Vice President Biden, who negotiated that deal with Senator McConnell. He's going to issue his report on gun control, preventing gun violence this week. And there was a remarkable series of State of the State speeches this week, including this one from Governor Dan Malloy in Connecticut.
In the midst of one of the worst days in our history, we also saw the best of our state. Teachers and a therapist that sacrificed their lives protecting students. And when it comes to preventing future acts of violence in our schools, let me say this: more guns are not the answer.
Peggy, Noonan, Newtown happened 1 month ago tomorrow. Yeah. We're going to hear from Vice President Biden on Tuesday. But we've been talking about this for the last few weeks on the program. Every time I talk to a group of senators, it does seem that there is not a lot of sharing of the president's sense of urgency on this issue.
On Capitol Hill, you mean? Look, guns are a very tough topic in America. I do think that if the vice president comes forward with his report on Tuesday that looks at the whole violence problem in a way that includes guns and extended magazines and such, but also how we deal with the mentally ill in America and what to do if you've got a 17-year-old kid who appears to be unstable and violent. There's a cultural angle to this, and we all know what it is. We all go through the motions on it. We have for 25 years. But a Democratic president addressing the cultural part of this would be a little like Nixon to China. So if Biden has something to say that touches on all those things, I think it would be good.
He's going to address all of them.
And what I'm told is they are going to put out what they call a comprehensive package. It's going to include legislation. It's going to include executive things the executive branch can do on its own. It's going to include the assault weapons ban, steps on comprehensive background checks. They're going to look at the mentally ill and other steps. They understand they're not going to get all of that, but they feel, I mean, I had one person close to the White House say, how can we not try for the assault weapons ban? How can we have another mass shooting come and not do this? And by the way, George, I talked to a Southern senator just yesterday who said his son, grown son, it happened to be in Jacksonville, Florida, middle of last week, a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, went into a gun shop to buy his wife a shotgun. 10 o'clock in the morning, middle of the week, he said the store was filled, 5 deep with people, stood in line with 20 people or more to buy. He said ever since Sandy Hook, there's just been this burst of
all of the statistics show that huge spike in sales of assault weapons this December. We have to take a quick break.